This is Land of Havilah, Jeremiah 11. Yahweh is still sounding the warning. Verse 1. The word that came to Jeremiah from Yahweh, saying, Hear the words of this covenant, and speak to the men of Judah and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and say to them, Yahweh, the God of Israel, says, Cursed is the man who doesn't hear the words of this covenant, which I commanded your fathers in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt, out of the iron furnace, saying, Obey my voice, and do them, according to all which I command you. So you shall be my people, and I will be your God, that I may establish the oath which I swore to your fathers, to give them a land flowing with milk and honey, as it is today. Then answered I and said, Amen, Yahweh. Comment in verses 1 and 2, Yahweh delivered this message to Jeremiah and commanded him to preach it to the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. In verses 2 to 5, the message is as basic as it gets. It's what Yahweh's been saying continually since the time of Moses. He says he brought Israel out of Egypt, gave them the law, and told them, This law is the covenant between you and me. Obey it. If you don't, you're cursed. If you do, you'll be my people. I'll be your God. I'll establish you in the promised land, and the milk and honey will flow. It was as simple as that. Then Jeremiah said, Amen, Yahweh. Jeremiah should say this as well. Verse 6. Yahweh said to me, Proclaim all these words in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem, saying, Hear the words of this covenant and do them. For I earnestly protested to your fathers in the day that I brought them up out of the land of Egypt, even to this day, rising early and protesting, saying, Obey my voice. Yet they didn't obey nor turn their ear, but everyone walked in the stubbornness of their evil heart. Therefore I brought on them all the words of this covenant which I commanded them to do, but they didn't do them. Comment in verses 6 to 8, Yahweh tells Jeremiah, Travel throughout Judah and preach this message in every city. He says, Tell them, turn your attention to the covenant and do it. Yahweh's been pleading with you ever since he brought us out of Egypt. He says he's been rising up early every day. That's an expression that means Yahweh's made this his primary business all these years, to urge the people to keep the covenant. But in verse 8, they haven't been listening, and he brought the covenant on them, which means he sent the adversities that he specified in the covenant. He sent them the consequences for disobedience that he spelled out in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, just to name a couple of places. He kept telling them to the effect, if you don't obey the covenant, a series of disasters will come to pass. Your condition will get more and more miserable. So be sure to obey it. He said that because the covenant was set up to go two directions. If they would obey, everything would be milk and honey. If they didn't, everything would go progressively downhill until Yahweh would finally displace them from the land. In verse 8, therefore, Yahweh brought on them all the words of this covenant, which is a reminder that already Yahweh has expelled the northern 10 tribes from the land. And as for Judah and Jerusalem, many of the curses of the covenant are already upon them. The one thing left is expulsion. He told them exactly how deportation would take place in Leviticus 26, 25 to 33, that it would involve enemy invasion, sieges of the cities, pestilence, starvation, parents cannibalizing their children, destruction of their idols, the casting of their dead bodies on the idols, the cities being laid waste, and whoever survived all that will be scattered among the nations. It's all on the doorstep if they still don't listen. No one should say it's all a crock. They shouldn't say it's been 800 years and Yahweh hasn't expelled us yet. Yahweh's been patient, yes, but he will fulfill his word. Now coming up, Judah and Jerusalem have formed a conspiracy against Yahweh. They don't say flat out that they oppose Yahweh. They oppose him and don't admit it so much. Verse 9, Yahweh said to me, A conspiracy is found among the men of Judah and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They've turned back to the iniquities of their forefathers who refused to hear my words. They've gone after other gods to serve them. The house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken my covenant which I made with their fathers. Comment, their ancestors were unfaithful all along, and the present generation continues the same. There was a bright spot here and there, but mostly they've been unfaithful. Verse 11, Therefore Yahweh says, Behold, I'll bring evil on them, which they will not be able to escape, and they'll cry to me, but I will not listen to them. Then the cities of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem will go and cry to the gods to which they offer incense, but they will not save them at all in the time of their trouble. For according to the number of your cities are your gods, Judah, and according to the number of the streets of Jerusalem have you set up altars to the shameful thing, even altars to burn incense to Baal. Comment in verse 12, when disaster strikes, they'll cry to their gods and get no answer. Their gods have no power to save them. In verse 13, Judah has as many gods as cities. Jerusalem has as many altars to Baal as they have streets. Yahweh tells Jeremiah, verse 14, Therefore don't pray for this people. Don't lift up cry or prayer for them, for I will not hear them in the time that they cry to me because of their trouble. Comment in verse 14, Yahweh says, Don't pray for this people. It's similar to what Yahweh told Moses when the people worshiped the golden calf. Quote, Now therefore leave me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and that I may consume them. Exodus 32:10. But Moses prayed for the people anyway, and God appreciated it. Exodus 32:14. So regarding this commandment to Jeremiah in verse 14, not to pray for the people, Yahweh probably wouldn't mind if Jeremiah prayed for them anyway. The verse coming up is notoriously difficult for translators, NET translation notes. Verse 15. What has my beloved to do in my house, since she's behaved lewdly with many, and the holy flesh has passed from you? When you do evil, then you rejoice. Comment, the first part of verse 15 is easy. It's that God's people are his beloved, like a beloved wife, but the wife has been unfaithful. What business does that wife have even coming home to her husband? And by extension to God, what business do his unfaithful people have coming to his temple and offering a sacred sacrifice on the altar? The altar is sort of the bed of the house where intimacy occurs. It's an abomination that the people should consort with other gods, then come home to the temple and presume to consort with Yahweh. And in the last sentence of the verse, they do this and rejoice about it. They're perfectly happy consorting with every god out there and bringing that filthiness home to Yahweh. They pollute the marriage bed, so to speak. Probably the language of the verse isn't explicit to keep it PG. Furthermore, Jeremiah is to say to all Judah, verse 16, Yahweh called your name a green olive tree, beautiful with goodly fruit. With the noise of a great roar he has kindled a fire on it, and its branches are broken. For Yahweh of armies, who planted you, has pronounced evil against you, because of the evil of the house of Israel and of the house of Judah, which they've done to themselves, in provoking me to anger by offering incense to Baal. Comment in verses 16 and 17, Yahweh called you a beautiful green olive tree with good fruit. In other words, there was a time that Yahweh looked at Israel and saw beauty, but now he looks at them and sees a tree that needs to be broken down and cast into the fire. Coming up, Yahweh will give Jeremiah knowledge of a plot against him, verse 11. Yahweh gave me knowledge of it, and I knew it. Then you showed me their doings. But I was like a gentle lamb that's led to the slaughter. I didn't know that they had devised plans against me, saying, Let's destroy the tree with its fruit, and let's cut him off from the land of the living, that his name may be no more remembered. But Yahweh of armies, who judges righteously, who tests the heart and the mind, I'll see your vengeance on them, for to you I have revealed my cause. Therefore Yahweh says concerning the men of Anathoth, who seek your life, saying, You shall not prophesy in Yahweh's name, that you not die by our hand. Comment in verse 18, Yahweh gave Jeremiah knowledge. It turns out from verses 19 to 21 that the knowledge had to do with a conspiracy against him. Anathoth in verse 21 is a town near Jerusalem that was deeded to the sons of Aaron, which are the priests, Joshua 21:13 to 18, and Exodus 29:9. This means the priests are conspiring to kill Jeremiah. In verse 21, Yahweh warns Jeremiah in advance that the priest will tell him, You shall not prophesy in Yahweh's name, that you not die by our hand. In other words, they'll say, Stop prophesying or we'll kill you. No doubt they'll sugarcoat it as much as possible and make it sound as legitimate as possible. by framing it more like, "Now, Jeremiah, be reasonable. We don't want to kill you. Stop this nonsense. You're under the God-given authority of the high priest." And he says, "Stop it." And they'll cite Deuteronomy 18:12, which says, "Anyone who doesn't conform to the judgment of the priest shall die." Jeremiah is a priest himself, and he lives in Anathoth himself, Jeremiah 1:1, but he's not the high priest. It puts modern Christians on notice that entire religious institutions can be corrupt, and if we go along with them, we'll go to hell with them. In verse 19, Jeremiah says he was like a gentle lamb that's led to the slaughter, meaning he was naive. He didn't suspect anything until Yahweh told him. He was as unsuspecting as a lamb being led to the slaughter. Yahweh told him in chapter 1, "Don't be afraid of them, for I'm with you to rescue you, and they'll fight against you, but will not prevail against you, for I am with you." End quote. Since they plot against Jeremiah, and since they're Yahweh's enemies anyway, verse 22, "Therefore Yahweh of armies says, Behold, I'll punish them. The young men will die by the sword. Their sons and their daughters will die by famine. There'll be no remnant to them, for I'll bring evil on the men of Anathoth, even the year of their visitation." Comment in verse 22, Yahweh says the priestly families who live in Anathoth will die by famine and sword. Yahweh will see to it that none of them survive. Quote, "There'll be no remnant to them." End quote. Some priestly families will survive, as documented in Ezra 2, but none of the families who conspired against Jeremiah will survive. They opposed Yahweh's efforts to save the nation. They were the number one guardians of the covenant, but didn't keep it, and taught the nation likewise. They'll die in the year of their visitation in verse 23, which means Yahweh will visit them. The famine and death will be from Yahweh. It'll look like the Babylonians are doing it, but behind the scenes it'll be Yahweh. Jeremiah 12 is next.